The Driver by Garet Garrett. And no, I did not stutter. That is actually the author's name, Garet Garrett. So, Garet Garrett, for your information, was an American journalist and author who lived, I believe, from the late 1800s to the mid 1900s. He was also a rather prominent voice of the American old right. And in addition to his journalism and nonfiction pieces, he wrote some novels which might be categorized as like business fiction or economic fiction, of which this book, The Driver, is such an example. Now, I first became aware of this book and because this is not by any means a well-known or popular book, at least now, anyways. But I became aware of this book because I came across an article or some kind of writing somewhere or other, which alleged that the well-known, rather divisive novel Atlas Shrugged by the well-known and rather divisive writer Ayn Rand may possibly have had as its source of inspiration, or at least a source of inspiration, this book, The Driver, because both books feature a protagonist surnamed Galt, and both books heavily deal with railroads and the railroad industry, as well as the conflict between business and government. So I just picked this book up because I wanted to see, if this really was like a source of inspiration for Atlas Shrugged. And having read it now, I can definitely say that it very well could be, but I guess it also could just be coincidental. But anyway, so let's talk about The Driver and what this book is about and whether it's any good or not. So, the story of The Driver is actually a historical novel which opens in the Depression of the 1890s, and it actually opens with the March on Washington of Coxey's Army, if you are familiar with what that was, what that movement was. And the book is narrated by a character who I don't think ever names himself. He is some kind of like journalist initially, I think, who goes to New York City to work on Wall Street, where he eventually becomes the secretary to a stock market speculator named Henry Galt. And again, here's the kind of potential link between this book and Atlas Shrugged, because they both feature, like I say, protagonists surnamed Galt. But anyway, Henry Galt is, like I say, a stock market speculator who sets about buying up large portions of stock of a failing railroad company. Because if you don't know, the 1890s was a pretty rough period for the railroad industry. A lot of railroad companies went bust. But anyway, so Henry Galt buys up the stock of this failing railroad company, and then due to his financial acumen and incredible powers of foresight, he turns it around and builds it back up, and eventually goes on to found a dynasty, like Rockefeller style dynasty, where he becomes essentially like possibly the richest man in America and one of the richest men in the world. But then he eventually comes into conflict with other vengeful members of the financial sector, as well as agents of the government who are looking into his business and his business practices, and whether or not he can be taken down by the antitrust laws. Again, kind of Rockefeller style. And that's pretty much the book. It's not a long book. This edition is like barely over 200 pages. It's pretty straightforward. It's about a guy becoming a tycoon, being narrated by this, again, I think nameless character who is just kind of his secretary. That's pretty much it. So let's talk about like the technical qualities of this book. The writing of this book is actually like really good. Garet Garrett could write. He could write pretty dang well. And I was struck more than once when reading The Driver by the artfulness of some of its passages. So I'm going to say right now, the writing, I have really nothing to complain about. It is quite commendable, actually, at times. And it's very quotable. There are a lot of lines out of this that feel very aphoristic and which contain some pretty valuable insights into human nature and the field of economics and like the practice of business and such. So the writing's actually really good. Now let's talk about the characters because unfortunately the characters are not quite as strong as the writing. The characters, by and large, in this book are very flat and unmemorable. Uh, Henry Galt is the main player here, even though he is not the narrator. This is one of those books where it's narrated in the first person, but the narrator is actually not the main focus of the book. The main focus of the book is Henry Galt, and he is really the only character who has any kind of memorability to him. He is audacious, daring, venturesome. He is also a very ruthless capitalist who is out to make his fortune and does make his fortune, and a very sizable one at that. Again, he creates basically a dynasty and incurs the wrath of the people that he has bested in the pursuit of wealth, as well as the government, kind of. But he is a memorable character, but that's pretty much it. The narrator don't know jack shit about him. He's just the cipher through which this story is told. And then Galt's family, in particular his daughters, one of which ends up in this kind of romantic relationship with the narrator, but there's not much to speak of as regards the secondary characters in this. It's just one character has some degree of memorability to him, and that is Henry Galt. But other than that, again, it's pretty flat. It is a pretty flat book as regards characters, so I really got to knock it. I mean, Galt is a pretty cool character just because he is such a go-getter, just because he takes no prisoners. He knows what he wants, and he is a man on a mission. And that's cool, and that is memorable, but besides that, there is basically nothing to remark upon when it comes to characters in this book, except how flat the rest of them are. So yeah, I got to knock it for the characters. Now let's just talk about like the actual story. It's well paced. It covers some time, a good amount of time actually, but it never feels rushed. It never feels like it skips over anything, and it really does feel like we really are like tracing this guy's journey from a rather daring but kind of small scale speculator in the stock market to eventual railroad tycoon and one of the richest men in the world. It feels like a journey. It really does. It feels like a journey. It feels well rendered as regards how it unfolds. But also, this book has behind it some interesting perspectives as regards business and industry, and perspectives that you're likely not going to see in fiction at this point in time. Like this was from an older era where men such as Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller were lionized as like titans of industry, men who basically made the world revolve. Nowadays, such men are largely vilified as robber barons and are icons of despisal, but that is not the perspective that this book takes. So this book is very adulatory towards men such as that, even though it is quite upfront with the fact that Galt basically just makes massive profits. You know, he becomes like a tycoon, the master of this large dynasty, and other people get run over in the process. But that's the law of the jungle, right? That's how business do. It's a cutthroat world. It's basically like social Darwinism, basically, and it really does kind of glorify that. Because Galt is a badass. He is an absolute badass, and you can't help but like him just because of how good he is at what he does. And that's kind of the remarkable thing about this, is that it is a kind of paean to the entrepreneur, those daring individuals who see opportunity where others are blind, and who seize that opportunity and make massive profits, but also create large-scale benefits to society in the process. That is kind of the nature of entrepreneurship and capitalism and what have you. And this book is like, it's just kind of a panegyric to that. Honestly, it's something, like I say again, that you're not going to see much of anymore, because business is largely now a dirty word, which so many people just view as an exercise in greed and rapacity, in which kind of sneer at and scorn. But that's, I don't think that's really an accurate. I don't really think that's an accurate depiction. Again, it's not. The book doesn't, shy away from the fact that some people get wrecked while others get rich. But once again, it's that social Darwinism. This definitely is like in that Rockefeller type mindset. But I liked it. I thought it was cool. And again, you can't help but like kind of root for Galt just because of what a dynamo he really is. So it's a good story, well told, that has some interesting perspectives and principles in it, and I enjoyed it. So to rate The Driver, how would I rate this book? I would give The Driver a B. The writing is really good, really sharp at times, really commendable, I have to say. But the characters, other than the central character of Galt, are very flat and unremarkable. But the story is cool, and it has some, again, a kind of a bygone outlook at its heart. Something definitely from a bygone era, times past, right? But if you're into like the economic history of America, because this book, while this book is fiction, it's fiction that is very, very true to some things that actually did happen, as regards like Rockefeller and like Standard Oil and stuff. If you're into kind of the Gilded Age era of America, if you're interested in like the doings of such industry titans as like Andrew Carnegie or Rockefeller, this book might just wet your whistle, because it's that kind of story, and it is not cynical about it. It is very much, again, adulatory as regards its central figure and his practices. And I gotta say, I liked it. I thought it was an interesting story, although again, there were some aspects of it that could have been done better. The characters are flat, and also the element of romance in this was a little bit too thin, I thought, to really be convincing. But flaws aside, it's a solid, actually a more than solid book, and one that has kind of unfortunately fallen by the wayside over the years, because again, this is not by any means now a well-known or prominent work, and that's kind of a shame, because I think it's actually a really good book. So yeah, I give it a good solid B. So The Driver by Garet Garrett. Have you read The Driver? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read The Driver, like I say, if you like business and economic fiction, or if you're interested in kind of Gilded Age titans like Carnegie and Rockefeller, give this book a look, because it is interesting, and it's fascinating because its perspective is likely so alien to those which are largely espoused today. So it may be something of a relic, but it's a cool relic at that, and I liked it. So I could recommend it, at least for select readers out there. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.